At least 320 million people worldwide suffer from depression. This represents 3.8% of the population, or 5% if only adults are counted. Around this suffering, there is also a business, with the global market for anxiety and depression treatments worth more than $12 billion. In this video, we will look at the 10 European nations with the highest rates of chronic depression. However, we must note that different sources show widely varying data. To compile this ranking, we relied on data from EUROSTAT, which includes only these 31 European nations. If you have other sources or information about your country, feel free to write them in the comments. Welcome to this new video of Amazing Europe. Number 10. Latvia. We start with a peculiar case. Latvia ranks among the top 10 European countries with the highest number of people suffering from depression, but surprisingly, it is one of the countries that uses the least amount of antidepressants. Currently, 20 daily doses per 1,000 inhabitants are registered, a number that, although significantly increased over the past 10 years, is still far from the 153 daily doses of the first country on the list. This shows that the problem of depression is recognized but not adequately addressed. A study found that many Latvians do not recognize the symptoms of depression, even after living with them for 2 years, and therefore do not seek medical help. Additionally, depression in Latvia is closely tied to alcohol abuse, with 13% of the population suffering from alcohol-related disorders. The main issue is understanding why alcoholism is so widespread. Disturbingly, research revealed that 10% of children under 15 have suffered sexual abuse. While we hope these figures are exaggerated, many Latvian scholars believe childhood traumas like this are at the root of alcohol abuse in adulthood. Added to this is the impact of the fall of the Soviet Union. Many of today's adults were children or teenagers during that time and directly experienced the radical social changes that followed. These factors contribute to the fact that 8.4% of the Latvian population suffer from chronic depression. Number 9. Finland. In 9th place, we find the happiest country in the world, at least according to the United Nations. We're talking about Finland, which leads the 2024 World Happiness Report. However, this title seems at odds with some worrying data. 8.8% of Finns suffer from chronic depression, and antidepressant use has increased by 130% over the last 20 years. Today in Finland, 82 daily doses of antidepressants are used per 1,000 inhabitants. But how can this apparent contradiction be explained? One reason could be Finland's long, dark winter, which leads to a form of seasonal depression that affects about 2% of the population. Paradoxically, though, the suicide peak doesn't occur in winter but in spring, suggesting that the weather is not the only determining factor. Another possible cause is alcohol. Over the last 30 years, the suicide rate has halved, just like alcohol consumption, showing a correlation between the two. But again, like in Latvia, the real question is, why do Finns drink so much? Is it just a cultural issue, or is there something deeper? So, is Finland really the happiest country in the world? Or maybe there's more behind the statistics? What do you think? Number 8. United Kingdom. According to the UK's Office for National Statistics, those most affected by depression are the sick and poor, followed by the young and women. In this chart, you'll find a detailed analysis of the population groups most vulnerable. The percentages show how many within each category experienced moderate or severe depressive symptoms in 2022. The chart clearly shows that the sick and poor are the most affected. As discussed in a previous video, the UK is among the European countries with the highest inequality between rich and poor. In 2022, the incomes of the 14 million poorest people fell by 7.5% compared to the pre-pandemic period. And if you think everyone faced the same fate, know that the incomes of the wealthiest fifth of Britons rose by 7.8%. The rising cost of living also weighs heavily on the general mood. Unsurprisingly, a quarter of those who reported difficulty paying bills or housing showed moderate or severe depressive symptoms. According to Eurostat, 8.9% of the population suffers from chronic depression, but if moderate cases are included, the figure rises to 16%. Number 7. Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, particular concern arises from the growing number of young people suffering from mental disorders. UNICEF estimates that 16.5% of young Luxembourgers suffer from disorders such as depression, anxiety, autism, bipolar disorder, and substance addiction, among others. Already in 2014, 23% of students between 12 and 18 reported feeling so sad and hopeless that they stopped participating in normal daily activities. 15% admitted to seriously considering suicide, while 8% had attempted to take their own lives. Behind these figures are young people struggling to find real purpose in life, and money seems to have little impact in this context. Luxembourg is one of the countries with the highest salaries in Europe and also hosts a wealthy immigrant population, as discussed in a previous video. Yet depression is widespread. It is estimated that 10% of the population suffers from chronic depression. Particularly vulnerable are second-generation immigrants, born in the country to foreign parents. Furthermore, Luxembourg holds the EU record for the highest rate of depressed men, although women remain the majority. 8.2% of men and 11.7% of women suffer from depression. Finally, the country spends a significant portion of its pharmaceutical budget on antidepressants. 2.4% of the total is allocated to purchasing these drugs, confirming the high usage. Number 6. Denmark. Like Luxembourg, 10% of Denmark's population suffers from chronic depression, but there is a significant peculiarity. Denmark is the only European country where antidepressant use has decreased. Over the past 10 years, there has been a 4% drop. However, consumption remains high, with 81 defined daily doses per 1,000 inhabitants. A study highlights that the results of depression treatments in Denmark are often unsatisfactory, as evidenced by the fact that many cases become chronic. Over the past 15 years, the number of patients admitted multiple times and those receiving disability pensions has also increased. Despite this, in the last 30 years, the number of available psychiatric beds in Denmark has been reduced by about 65%, while the number of depressed people has doubled. This suggests that the country is not adequately addressing this social issue. It is also surprising that Denmark ranks among the top 10 happiest countries in the world, according to the World Happiness Report. This ranking, compiled by the UN, is based on people's self-assessments of their happiness levels. This raises many questions. How can a population with an increasing number of depressed people claim to be happy? What makes a person truly happy? Is it possible that someone believes they are happy when they are not? We would love to hear your opinion on this topic. Number 5. Croatia. Also in Croatia, the response to this social issue seems inadequate, as highlighted by Oxford University. In the past 20 years, the hospitalization rate for depression has doubled. Now, 11.6% of the population aged 15 and older in Croatia suffer from chronic depression. Mental disorders are the second leading cause of hospitalization in Croatia, right after childbirth. Only recently has the government begun to take action, establishing a strategic framework for mental health. However, many lament that Croatia has yet to adopt a national suicide prevention strategy, despite the suicide rate being higher than the European and global average. The mental health of Croatian children and adolescents is particularly alarming. In 2021, 29% of high school students in Zagreb reported self-harming at least once, nearly double the rate from 2016. In Croatia, nearly 12% of children between the ages of 10 and 19 suffer from mental health issues, amounting to about 50,000 young people. A psychologist in Zagreb has noted a significant shift in students' concerns. If in the past they worried about grades or romantic relationships, today they confide statements like "I cut myself," "I can't handle stress," and "life has no meaning." Number 4. Germany. Germans are the largest consumers of antidepressants in Europe in absolute terms. In 2020, they spent €783 million, accounting for 1.4% of total pharmaceutical expenditures. Antidepressant use in Germany has tripled in the past 20 years. Young people show depressive symptoms more often than older people, but the latter seek help far less frequently. This is partly because depression, especially among the elderly and their loved ones, is seen as a normal consequence of aging, rather than as a real disease that can be treated. Often, these individuals feel too tired and hopeless to seek help, but it is absolutely crucial to do so. Depression leads to isolation, and this must be avoided at all costs. A national survey revealed that 84% of depressed people in Germany have completely withdrawn from social life, and nearly half have seen their relationships end due to the illness. The number of children with mental disorders is also concerning. It is estimated that a quarter of minors suffer from some kind of mental health issue. Regarding depression, the percentages are lower compared to other countries, with about 2% of children between 10 and 17 diagnosed, and 17% of young people between 18 and 29. However, if we focus on the over 15 population, 11.6% suffer from chronic depression. Number 3, Sweden. In Sweden, as in Germany, depression affects young people more than the elderly. The age group most affected is between 25 and 34 years old, with an incidence 3 times higher than those over 65. According to a study, Sweden ranks first in the European Union for young people at risk of depression. 41% of people aged 15 to 24 are at risk, compared to an EU average of 14%. Moreover, the country stands out for having the highest rate of depression among the poor. If Sweden's population were divided into 5 income groups, 17.8% of the lowest income group suffers from chronic depression, compared to the national average of 11.7%. This shows that the young and the less affluent are the most vulnerable. In fact, between 2011 and 2017, there was a 60% increase in children forced to live in emergency housing due to economic reasons. As for the use of antidepressants, Sweden ranks 4th in Europe, with 105 defined daily doses per 1,000 inhabitants, more than double the amount from 20 years ago. Despite these worrying figures, Sweden is also among the 10 happiest countries in Europe, according to the United Nations. Number 2, Portugal. Portugal is the opposite of Sweden, at least when it comes to age groups. In this country, the older you get, the higher the risk of depression. People over 65 are 4 times more likely to be depressed than young people aged 15 to 24. However, unlike Sweden, here depression does not seem closely linked to income. Although, as in the rest of Europe, the poor are more affected, the gap between rich and poor is not as pronounced as in other countries. The same goes for education levels. The lower it is, the higher the percentage of people with depression. But even in this case, the difference between those who dropped out early and university graduates is not as significant. The real peculiarity of Portugal is the gender gap in terms of depression. It is, in fact, the European country with the largest gender difference. 7.5% of men suffer from chronic depression, compared to an astonishing 16.4% of women. On average, 12.2% of the population is affected by depression, and the typical profile of a depressed person is a woman over 50. Portugal is also the second country in Europe for antidepressant consumption, having quadrupled in the last 20 years. A full 4% of total pharmaceutical spending is allocated to these drugs, the highest percentage in Europe. Before revealing the unexpected number 1 country, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you don't miss our new videos. This costs you nothing but would help us spread our project. Thank you very much. Number 1, Iceland. If you think it's due to the long winter months, that doesn't seem to be true, as a study found that the prevalence of seasonal affective disorder is unexpectedly low in Iceland. Iceland, despite being among the happiest countries in Europe according to the UN, holds sad records related to depression. It is the European nation with the highest percentage of depressed people, both among men and women. In fact, 15.6% of those over 15 years old suffer from chronic depression. It is also the top country for antidepressant consumption, both 20 years ago and today. In terms of spending on antidepressants relative to total pharmaceutical spending, Iceland is second only to Portugal. One of the main reasons for this phenomenon is the ease with which Icelandic psychiatrists prescribe antidepressants, even for mild forms of depression and anxiety disorders, unlike in other Nordic countries. The Icelandic government is aware of the seriousness of the situation, and since 2021 it has increased the mental health budget, allocating about 12% of total healthcare resources to it. At the same time, some non-governmental organizations promote a therapy-based approach, but accessing psychological care remains difficult and expensive. Many Icelanders find it more convenient and immediate to resort to antidepressants, especially considering that a box of these costs 7 times less than a session with a psychologist. The increase in antidepressant prescriptions among young girls, which has risen by 90% in 10 years, is particularly concerning. This increase in depression among young people is not just an Icelandic phenomenon. The Croatian psychologist we mentioned earlier said something that made us think a lot. Children are like the canaries in the old coal mines, they sense when something is wrong. If our children are not well, it means society is not well. The question we ask you is, in your opinion, what is wrong with our society? What has changed in recent decades to cause such a drastic increase in the number of depressed people, especially among young people? Write what you think in the comments. If you want more information regarding healthcare in Europe, we recommend our video on the 10 European countries with the least healthy populations. You'll find it at the top right. That's all for this video. See you next time.